Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So, the Dispar fellow has made another video claiming his 1.4 result and he can't get anything else and it only comes out one way no matter how he does the experiment, blah 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 blah. I guess I'll play some of it, 16-minute video. He's not going to argue any of the physics. He's just going to spend 16 minutes, talking shit. But anyway, so context. Let's go again. They're arguing for free momentum, something that's pretty much, universally stated by most physicists to be not a possibility. Frankly, and it's only in circumstances where they're not really taking account of what it is they're saying that they even suggest that such a thing is possible. So, there's a little short video here by Sean Carroll talking about the most beautiful idea in physics, conservation of momentum. So, yeah, let's play it.
Conservation of momentum. And that is the reason why I think that's the most beautiful idea in physics, is because it shifts us from a view of natures and teleology to a view of patterns in the world. So when you were Aristotle, you needed to talk a vocabulary of why is this happening, what's the purpose of it, what's the cause, etc., because its nature does or does not want to do that. Whereas once you believe in conservation of momentum, things just happen. They just follow the pattern. You have Laplace's demon, ultimately, right? You give me the state of the world today, I can predict what it's going to do in the future. I can predict where it was in the past. It's impersonal, and it's also instantaneous. It's not directed toward any future goals. It's just doing what it does, given the current state of the universe. That, I think, even more than either classical mechanics or quantum mechanics, that is the profound, deep insight that gets modern science off the ground, conservation of momentum.
All right, so, it's not a little thing you're claiming. So if you're going to claim that you can, break that is, you can destroy momentum and then poof it into existence, you can break the cause and effect chain that he's basically defining as the core of physics, that you can account for anything's motion. Now, he did say silly things like instantaneous, which, obviously there's no such thing in our universe. There's no instantaneous events. They all are time restricted and time dependent. But this isn't a minor thing you're claiming, you goofballs. So take some responsibility for the fact that you're defining a whole new physics here. You really are. Now, the fact that they were so lazy and they never realized that any time they convert energy from a big thing into a little thing, or from a little thing into a big thing, that every single time they do that, they have to destroy kinetic energy or they have to destroy momentum, that there is no fundamental compatibility between the two theories, that they are in direct contradiction to each other. I mean, the fact that they didn't notice that, or they don't take account for that, isn't a big surprise, because the physics is sloppy and unevidenced. Okay, so I could make the same argument that they did the same thing with wave-particle duality. So I could do a quick little drawing of that. That there's a simple experiment that basically debunks any notion of wave interference in the slit experiments, for example. And the simple experiment is you just put a radio signal on this side and your radio signal on this side, and you put them in phase. That is, you have the same signal in both antennas, okay, just like the light. Alright, and you put your receiver in the middle, and all you have to do is move your receiver this way, and you'll create on and off and on and off and on and off, just like the fringe pattern in photons. They'll go, the signal will be jammed, not jammed, jammed, not jammed, jammed, not jammed. Because you're going to put one side out of phase, one side in phase, one side out of phase, one side in phase, blah, 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 blah. And so it proves that there's no need for the two slit silly diagram of, oh, we have to have these two waves and these vectors all intersect with each other, and the photon goes all funky. When it hits another photon, it gets ruined and interferes and blah, blah, blah. There's no interference here. There's no space for any interference. This signal never hits this signal until they reach the surface. That's entirely the surface that does the math. The surface does the math. There's no math in here. No math in the space that the photons are traveling. What happens is decided by what lands on the surface, not what went through the atmosphere or through the space. And so it's a pretty decisive argument. Pretty much debunks any notion that this is wave interference. They don't pay any attention. They're never going to hear a counter argument to this argument. They're never going to explain it. They won't. They won't account for it. All right, so in all these experiments, we're basically arguing about something where I can give lots of examples. Okay, so I gave the example. You have a spaceship, right? And you do that simple little thing here. Okay, there's your little engine, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to navigate by throwing stuff out the spaceship. I mean, the simple argument is momentum works and kinetic energy doesn't. The physicist will concede, okay, that I can shove 1,000 atoms out this side going 1 mile per hour. And then I can put one atom going 1,000 miles per hour out this side. And I'm not going to change how I'm going to move, even though I have 1,000 times more energy, 1,000 times more watts, okay, of energy went this way. I'm not going to go that way, because this 1 watt somehow is going to counteract the 1,000 watts. 1,000 watts over here, 1 watt over here. Somehow, okay, it happens. Why does it happen? Well, because the momentums are the same. 1,000 atoms going 1 mile an hour, okay, is the same as 1 atom going 1,000 miles an hour. That's the same amount of force in the universe. Same amount of pressure, same amount of weight. These two things hit your door, they will impact it the same amount. Now, yes, punching a board fast means you can crack the board or crack the wood. So, yes, surfaces, how you're impacting a surface matters. How much force, how you apply the force, whether you apply the force with an arrow tip or with a flat tip. I mean, lots of things will decide whether or not the force will have a certain effect. But that is the same amount of energy. It's the same amount of capacity to move mass in the universe. 1,000 atoms going 1 mile an hour can push the same amount of stuff as 1 atom going 1,000 miles an hour. The 1 atom doesn't have 1,000 times more ability to move things. I mean, you can do it with football players. You can go on. And so they won't counter-argue any of this. They won't explain why they have absolutely zero evidence, okay, that it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, or 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast, or 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. They won't explain why they have zero evidence of any of that being true. They won't explain car crash evidence. They won't explain anything. They'll just keep doing this crap where they take a little niche experiment and play a game with it. Alright, so let's go over the niche experiment, which I frankly considered pretty simple as a concept, but obviously you can do it all kinds of wrong ways. I mean, as I pointed out, well, I'll get to that in another video, the whole moments thing, where they can't even get that one right. Alright, so simple-ish experiment. Now, you can do this with, I guess I should have suggested maybe doing it with his carbon fiber. Alright, it's just that you have a smaller arc then, which is a disadvantage, but at least you can't screw up the pendulums. You can't make them go higher and lower. So you could make these stiff bars, or you can make them just pendulums with a thin wire, and they're hanging from a fixed point. It has to be a fixed point, right? I mean, logically you're saying what you're trying to figure out is you don't want them moving up and down, right? You don't want these pivot points moving up and down. That'll kind of screw up your experiment. And the idea is you put motion into one of them, and you create a subtle mechanism. These could be magnets even, right? So you could try it with magnets. Have attractive magnets, and then swing one side, and see if you can through the magnetism, compel the other side to sympathetically start moving. So maybe that's even a better experiment. I didn't even think of that until just now. But technically, I suppose they would start to wobble a little bit. So yeah, you'd probably have to use something stiffer. But it would be interesting. The pendulums would tend to move in. They'd end up going funny arcs. So that would be the disadvantage. But anyway, the idea is you create some subtle mechanism that connects this motion to this one's motion. Now, I've suggested over and over again that this is what I did and it worked. Okay, that I just connected it with a string of rubber bands, and that's all I really needed. I did try it with a weight, and it does change it. So I can put a little bit of weight here, and that guarantees that every time this moves, there's a little bit of tension put on this other pendulum, and it's pulled by that little bit of tension, that little tug. And so slowly but surely you take the motions on this side, okay, and if you have this in the right resonance, so to speak, this motion will start duplicating that motion, and all the energy eventually will go from this side to this side. Now, as I pointed out, even if all the energy doesn't go, you could still detect whether momentum or kinetic energy is working based on just measuring the total amount of motion you have in both objects. So when both of them are moving, you know that both of them have to have the total amount. So instead of doing this, all right, which I over and over and over suggested, he keeps doing this. Okay, let's tie the things together rigidly. So now he not only has a rubber band here, a tight one, he has tight ones here, shock absorbers, and that's essentially all these are, shock absorbers. This is a shock absorber, this is a shock absorber, and this ends up being a shock absorber. And what do shock absorbers do? Well, they absorb the jitters, the faster motions. So what he's really doing is basically saying if anything's going fast here, there's going to be a system to dampen it right out of existence. So it's going to try to force the energy someplace else. So any quick motions are going to be discouraged, all right, by the shock absorber system that he's creating. All right, and he says somehow he can't do it this way. Well, we didn't get to see any video of his failures to make it work by just connecting the two with a loose wire. Okay, we see no evidence that that doesn't work, that you can't do it. Now, I frankly did on my porch, so I know you can do it. So just BS. So he's doubled down on it. Like I said, I've explained this now 4 times, at least three videos now. I've pointed out that this is one of the ways you have to do the experiment, is to minimize the connection between these two, because you can't. But the last thing you want to do is bend this pendulum, because then you're raising the object, and it's obviously going to swing slower if you've raised it higher, because now you've taken the energy from the velocity and you've put it into storage. Any raising of the object is putting the energy in storage. You're not going to see the energy as motion because you've stored it as gravitational potential. So I overtly explain that, and now I have to do it again and explain why this mechanism, this new one he contrived up, is a piece of crap. Okay, and the other, and I only played the first, minute of his video. And you could just, the bullshit was already steamingly obvious. So he's completely changed the experiment. Now he's swinging them in parallel, in the sense that the objects are now in this kind of arrangement where this one's hanging here and this one, they're swinging in the same directions. Okay, and that's a way you can do the experiment, but frankly that requires a mechanism that can twist. So not as good, frankly. But so the other thing he did, he made a silly piece of crap sleeve for one of the weights, and the sleeve wasn't the right size, and so the object was inside the sleeve, and the sleeve basically deformed, so it went from being round to being oval, and it changed the shape of the thing going through the photo detector. So obviously one side the size was this size, and the other one the size was much bigger. So the lighter weight was measuring much slower because of that huge difference. Now, did he redo the experiment just fixing that? Because I'm sure he wouldn't get 1.3 and 1.4 numbers anymore. I mean, if he fixed that, it clearly wouldn't get 1.4 numbers anymore. It couldn't get the same numbers having fixed that error. And yet he's still kind of claiming that, oh, no matter what he does, he just can't evade getting 1.4. So it's just all such a pile of shit. He's just contriving this nonsense. He has no theoretical understanding of the physics. He can't explain how it really is possible, and he won't account for the fact that, yes, he's doing new vital physics, and he's going to prove that for 350 years all the physicists didn't know that there's no such thing as the conservation of momentum. You don't have to conserve it, it's just a pile of crap. It's a silly idea. Why would you need to conserve momentum when the only thing that's important is your kinetic energy theory? That again, you have no evidence is real, in the sense that you can't even do the simplest of experiments demonstrating it. You can't demonstrate it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. You can't demonstrate it taking 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. You can't show any of this crap to be real, and yet that's the theory he's defending. Ugh, pathetic. And defending in this obnoxious, just being as pious and full of shit as he could be as a human being, in terms of saying, well, look, this one experiment proves it because I did it my special own way. And any critique of it he takes as some sort of, you're just playing games to point out glaring mistakes. Like, I shouldn't have pointed out that when Ian Gosling was dropping stuff, he's dropping it from the wrong distance. And I shouldn't point out that, there's this concept of a quick release. Yeah, it's kind of important. You should try to do that. Yeah, no. Just such bullshit. Alright, so I guess that's enough of a background. So let's play the fucking piece of shit. From the sack of shit lying piece of dirt. Yes, here we go. So we title it "The Power of 1.4 Compels You." It's like some kind of reference to The Exorcist or something. Ugh. Alright, so this is the only part I saw, this little beginning here, where he just starts off with a monstrous lie.
Continuing with another coupled oscillator or coupled pendulum experiment. This is another setup. In the previous one, the complaint was that,
and this one's even worse. So again, it's just hilarious. He does have even a worse idea, more against what I'm arguing.
The connecting string between the two pendulums was too rigid, which caused the pendulum to bend. The string would pull back the pendulum, and it would cause a little bend in the pendulum.
It would cause the object to rise or fall. Yeah, gigantic. When you're supposed to be figuring out, well, how much energy do we have? Well, again, if you can't figure out that it takes energy to lift something up, then really, if I have to explain that to you 4 times, then you're pretty fucking stupid.
And therefore raising the pendulum.
Let's see if you can see this shit. Now, gotta move this over. Okay. Oh, God. I just hate this planet. Assholes.
Upwards. And that was a problem. Now, so I had to loosen the connecting string, which...
So it doesn't make any sense. I mean, he's sitting there saying that, look, I'm going to fix it by making it even more canted. I'm going to put even a bigger bend in the pendulum. I mean, it's just so stupid. I'm going to nail it to the roof on rubber bands.
Did, but the problem was...
That'll stop it from going up and down, right? I mean, if I put a rubber band and then the pendulum, that'll stop the pendulum from going up and down, right? Shit.
The more I loosened it, the less energy would be the less energy that would be transferred. And so
so you just have to modify it then to get it so it's better matched. But that's it. It's the principle is kind of obvious, okay? It's going to pull in the same direction each time, so it just has to do that at a resonant frequency, so to speak, or something in that range. So you just tweak it until you get a better frequency.
Is that both pendulums should swing as independently as possible.
Yeah, and so this is the most unindependent as possible. They couldn't be more tied to each other all the time. They're constantly in contact with each other in this experiment. They are never independent, ever.
Without creating a bend in the pendulum. And so
he says, without creating a bend in the pendulum, and here he has this gigantic bend in the pendulum. I mean, what? It was just hilarious. He completely misses the subject entirely.
When I loosen the string to the point where I would be able to swing perfectly independently, then no energy at all would be transferred.
Oh, it's just a pile of shit. It's just an absolute pile of fucking goddamn garbage and shit. I mean, I did this experiment on my porch. It's really, and it's inevitable. You can't stop the energy from being transferred. So just imagine what he's saying. There's two pendulums. And their maximums, when one swings out, you can understand that it would have to tighten the string. So let's say a loose string is holding them to each other. That string would have to at least get tighter and tighter, right? So it's moving the string up against gravity. So it's obviously putting a little tension on the other pendulum. And you can understand that there's no way you could avoid that. So anytime the motion is going out this way, it would have to tighten that string and it would have to push on the other object. There's no way no energy could be transferred. That is just an absolute fucking lie. No way he saw that happen. I couldn't get any energy to move from one to the other. That's a fucking lie.
So I would let the one mass swing, but the two mass would remain perfectly stationary.
Bullshit. Then what did you tie them together with? How the fuck could you even, again, it's impossible to imagine what you put a thin, tiny thread here? It was so light and so loose that it was such a tiny amount of movement in it that it couldn't put any tension on the pendulum at all? Or where did you put it? Way here at the top or something? What did you do to fuck it up? It's a pretty simple diagram. You just tie it here somewhere in the middle or lower. The lower you put it, the more it's going to pull on the other object. So frankly, the lower you tie them, the more torque you're going to convey per swing. So, but it's impossible to do this in any kind of reasonable way and not have the other object move. It's impossible. I'm claiming it's impossible unless you used something so light and so weightless. That's the only way you could do it. It had to be weightless, or you had to have it all the way up at the ceiling. I mean, whatever the top point is of the pendulum. There's no other way. You liar.
And not a single amount of energy would be transferred.
Lie. I didn't realize it was such a gross lie right here in the beginning. What a fucking lie. It's just plainly theoretically impossible. You cannot swing the pendulum, swing the loop, okay, pull the thing up, do things, make all of that motion, and the other side doesn't feel anything. Of course, the motion has to be conveyed.
So there was something wrong with the setup.
Yeah, the thing wrong with the setup is it doesn't come out with your silly answer, and that's why you evade it.
I think it was because of the fact that the two pendulums were connected to a rigid wooden rod. And I started to look up on YouTube different kinds of setups of coupled alpha.
Yeah, and they're all bullshit setups, right? They're all setups that aren't intending to do this, which is to measure the completeness of the transfer of the energy. They're setups that are supposed to be demonstrating something else, okay, just moving the motion from one side to the other. They don't care whether they've created a shock absorber system that's absorbed half the energy. That's not the intent of this experiment. This experiment is to try to get all of the energy into one object or all of the energy into the other object, not to have a whole bunch of energy tied up in the tension of rubber bands. Jackass. I mean, you can't even figure out that simple part.
And then I saw something that looked like this. I have replaced the wooden stick with a rubber band. And the thing is, with this one, instead of letting them swing from left to right, I can let them swing from front to back, like that.
Yeah, well, you can see right here that the weight of the two objects has already changed the angle at which this stretches. So the stretch is this the heavier the object, the more the angle is going to be down. The lighter the object, the more the angle is going to be up. So obviously this angle here is going to be very big where there's more weight and very small where there's less weight, which means it's higher and lower. So the whole thing is just going to do this. This whole rubber band bullshit that he made is trying to compensate. It's just dampening all the energy out of the system. It's a gigantic dump. It's an energy dump, an energy damp. It's fucked the whole experiment.
So the advantage is that the pendulums can swing independently, right? There's going to be no bend in the pendulums. So let me show you an example.
So big lie. Yeah, I mean, it's just a big lie that they're independent. They're clearly not going to be at all independent.
I'm just going to let this one swing. I'm going to transfer the energy to the second mass.
And look how much the rubber bands are moving. Look how this system is doing this. And it's going to start doing this. That's not what you want to see. You don't want to see a whole bunch of motion someplace else. You want to see motion in only one place. Those two bobs are the only thing you want to see moving.
Focus. So now the one mass is stationary. It's gaining velocity again. Now the two mass is stationary.
So it's just a waste of time. So again, he didn't pay any attention to what I've said 3 times. That if you're going to sit there and do the experiment where half the energy is going to be in your dampening device, yeah, you're not going to get the right answer.
And there we go again, vice versa. So it seems to work. And from the side, we can see that the pendulums are swinging freely. There's no bending in the pendulums.
Except the whole thing is a pendulum. The whole frickin' experiment is doing this. Shit. They're obviously all the energy isn't in the pendulums because a big pile of the energy is moving both of them at the same time. Oh, idiot.
So this is, I think, a good setup. And so now let's put the timers under the weights. Show you the setup up close.
Alright, so this is a waste of my time, so I probably won't play all of it. Alright. I mean, so he did the rubber bands before, he cut them, broke them, did this, did that. He did the experiments and he says it didn't work. But we never saw any of that. But look at the difference in these angles. Can you understand that this is essentially a shock absorber? This is the reason why these angles are different is because now their motions are going to be different. One of them's going to, put more restraint against any forward motion. So you're basically just saying that yes, you're going to basically, it's the same idea as you can tune a shock absorber to pull out different speeds of impact. And that's all this is essentially a system that's designed to stop things from moving too fast.
The rubber band suspended over here. Yeah, this is all rubber band, and then this is another rubber band, and then connected to the string.
So even worse, he has the string connected to another rubber band. So just what I said a minute ago about how that's the last thing you want to do is put a rubber band and then your pendulum, because of course then this will happen. The rubber band will do this. And what's that mean? The pendulum has to go up and down. So if the rubber band's going up and down, then the pendulum's going up and down. So you're converting your motion, your velocity of the swing is being converted into stretching the rubber band and unstretching the rubber band, which is stealing the energy.
Now, about the weights being the same size, I have replaced the piece of paper with a hard piece of plastic, which also has a diameter of 2.5.
Yeah, well, you should have done the same exact thing to both objects. That would have been the simple thing, is put the same sleeve on both of them. But whatever. So one of them's still shiny and one of them's translucent. Not ideal, but whatever. But what you have to do is account for the fact that in the first experiment, what you did didn't work, frankly. And it's clear that the faster object, the readings you were getting were slower than the actual velocity, because what was going through the timing gate was a bigger piece of paper. And so take account for that and admit that, oh yeah, well those results probably were off. And so I didn't get a perfect 1.4, did I?
Centimeters. Let me show you. Hold on. Yeah, my thumb is on the number 2, but you can see it's 2.5 centimeters. Okay, hold on.
Why don't you just put the two next to each other?
So now the shape of
Bottom
the one
to
mass,
bottom.
right? Because it's hard plastic, it's not going to change. It's perfectly round. It's not going to turn into an oval. Okay, it's a.
It did in the previous thing. So he's talking as if this was some sort of naggy problem, when no, it was a real problem. What you did didn't work. It's a fact, and I had to point it out to you that it wasn't right. Well, you know, you just take no account that, yeah, you made a mistake. You did a poor experiment. You had a variable in it that you didn't account for, and somebody else had to point it out to you. You fuck. Over and over again, somebody else has to do this job of debunking your errors. That's not good science.
Air in this room, as it starts moving, is not going to bend its shape, because obviously there's so much turbulence in the room, lots of wind here.
So he's making a joke out of the fact that it's just visually obvious that's what happened in his previous experiments. It's visually obvious. I mean, do I have to play the video again? Do I have to take the frames and show it over and over again? So what a cunt. He's weaseling out on even accepting that that actually did happen. That the air did actually move the paper, because it was just paper. All right, and the paper went oval instead of being round. It went oval, and when it goes oval, it gets wider. So he's denying that that's a fact. That's how much of a liar this fucking piece of shit is. He's not an honest player in this conversation. He's just constantly fucking doing everything he can to pretend he can just keep lying about the physics, about the theories, and about what has been stated and what experiments people are suggesting.
So now about the center of mass. The center of masses, are they aligned? I don't know exactly. Okay, so this is the top of the mass 1, and you can see it stops around here. So I don't know where exactly the center of mass is. Maybe.
So you won't even take a shot at a reasonable guess and put a dot on here or something. So at least it could be, from the video, it could actually be ascertained whether the dot does rise or fall.
It's here, maybe it's here. But as you can see from this view, they seem to be aligned more or less. I can change maybe. I can do one test like this in this way, and then maybe raise the one mass a little bit upwards and do it again, or lower it, I don't know, and then see if there's any difference. Let's weigh the masses. This is mass 1.
Well,
52.35.
I'll trust him on that one.
Bounce up and down, and thereby moving the center of mass upwards, downwards, upwards, downwards. Now after a while, the rubber band more or less stabilizes. But still.
What a pile of crap. No, they don't. They do the same thing over and over. That's how the experiment works. It does the same thing over and over. The energy moves from one side to the other side, from one side to the other side. There's no, over time it changes fundamentally. No, it doesn't. It just loses its energy eventually. So yeah, you don't see it as much, but it's still having the same amount of influence. It's doing exactly the same thing on the first swing as it's doing on the last swing. It's the same fucking mechanism. So the more canards and bullshit this asshole throws in here, like somehow it regularizes and changes, so it doesn't really having an effect. Yeah, it's having an effect. It's not. It gets less and less visible the less energy you're using. So less energy in the system, the less obvious it becomes that it's going up and down. That's all.
Keeps moving a little bit up and down, up and down. So I assume, well, I'm pretty sure of it, that this is going to be the greatest flaw. For you, no.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what I said not to do. So that's pretty much as flawy as you can get, to do exactly what I said you don't want to do. So, yeah, there's not much else I can say. So, yeah, this just breaks any notion of these two pendulums being independent.
Yeah, so probably have to fix that. Another view from the side so that you can see that the pendulums are swinging perfectly independent.
I mean, obviously, they're not independent. This whole thing is bouncing all over the place. So again, he keeps saying they're independent. Where's the independence? There's no independence. Just, such horse shit. I mean, you can see this one, is going at a faster rate, and this one dampens over that mechanism. So it's, this angle changes probably as this gets to its maximum. This angle's changing by a degree or two. So you're storing energy and changing the height of the two objects.
Okay, right, this is going to be the first try. You can see the timer here. Let's start with timer A. Hold on.
I tend to say I wish you would just let one side go through the whole thing so you could see the initial energy that goes in. Now, when the initial energy goes in, he's pulling on those rubber bands. So the energy is more than just the energy of the velocity when he lets it go, because the rubber bands have now stored more energy in their tension. He's pulled on the rubber bands. He's stretched them. So they're going to add a little extra. And that's so that extra is in the system.
Right. Now you can't see the connecting rubber band this time. I will maybe try to do another view. Right.
Well, at least this view has some hope of doing a frame rate or something. So we can definitely see the arcs are much different. So, let's see if I can get both sides of that. So, this one travels, whatever, 2 inches. The other one goes like 4 inches.
Now you can't see.
So you can see a pretty big
connecting rubber band this time. I will
how far
maybe try
it
to
swings.
Do another view. Right.
So, this is markable. You can say that the furthest this one, black one, went was to the edge of the shadow. And so this one, the furthest it goes is probably, there. So that's another way of measuring it, I suppose. But again, they're going up and down this whole time, so the whole thing is fucked. Alright, so let's see if he says anything else. Different view.
Okay. These are going to be slow
velocity. So you can
velocity.
see as soon as he pulls it back, he has to push on those rubber bands. So those rubber bands are getting pulled on as soon as he pulls it back. He's putting extra tension on the rubber bands. So there's energy in the rubber bands that hasn't been released when it goes through the gate.
Okay, I'll show you. You can see the rubber band has completely stabilized by now.
Right, it's not stabilized. Look at it.
Right.
Every piece of it's moving. It's moving here, side to side. It's moving here. It's going up and down. What stabilized is there? I mean, what a pile of shit. It's stabilized. Look how much it's swinging here. It's a huge amount of swinging. Huge. And you can see they're always at different angles. So the angles are pretty much probably just eating up the difference in the velocities. So if you could force them to be the same angle, that is the same tension on the rubber band, then one wouldn't get dampened more than the other. But the fact that they're putting different tension on the rubber band means that one gets dampened more than the other. So again, it's just a shock absorber. And it all premised on his lie that if he did this experiment simple, a nice rigid, fix the pendulum to a rigid position, all right, and just have a tiny little thing connecting the two objects, a little loose, string with a little weight on it. No, he didn't. She chose not to do that. That doesn't work. He chose not to do it. Alright, so this is all the samey. Okay, let's see if there's any other angles. No other angles. Okay, so his numbers, the same thing, and he's just going to do his 1.4 crap again.
Next, 655 divided by 469. 469 equals 1.39.
Right. So why don't you do your experiment the way it was, okay, with the paper cuff. Do it exactly like the paper cuff with this new weight and see if you get 1.39 again. See what kind of number you get then. Because we know, I frankly know, those timings had to be off. There's no way it had to be. It's obvious. The paper wasn't the same dimension. So the velocity was clearly not what you thought it was. So go ahead and do that. Alright, he's just such a belligerent asshole. Yeah, so it's just all the same shit over and over. Alright, so enough of that crap. Let's see if there's any comments. I mean, they're all going to reward him for another, great job proving there's no such thing as conservation of momentum. So so this is their proof. They don't have any evidence, but they've proven it. Alright, so, E equals 1/2 mv squared after all. Right, so even though they don't have any evidence of any of the car collisions, they don't have any evidence in how much fuel it takes to go a speed, they don't have any evidence when in hydraulics, they have no evidence from space navigation, but they're confident. So you could use clay balls hanging from string. So why, you could, yeah. Anything will work. But frankly, all he had to do was fix the mistakes. It wasn't like it was all that hard to find weights that are going to be the same size. But that's the idea, is to make things that pass through the gate at the same size. So I mean, yes, you could make cylinders that were different heights, but then you're getting into the danger that one of them might go through the gate higher or lower than the other one. I don't think the problem is the timing gates in this case. Alright, you are the master of manipulation, Dispar. So this is his satire. So he clearly did an experiment previously that was bullshit, okay? The paper cuff idea was clearly stupid. And does this asshole take any account for the fact that, yeah, there was a flaw in the experiment? No. And they just keep doing this over and over again. So again, what's the point of me making the video explaining how you're trying to isolate the two pendulums, not trying to make twins out of them? You're not trying to glue them together. You're trying to separate them as much as possible. Alright, you did it a slightly different way and still managed to get the result you want. So that's exactly how it really read. If he would have just changed the paper cuff, if he just changed that and left the experiment completely the way it was, Michael, do you think the results would have still been the same? 1.4. I mean, I don't think you have a logical alternative but to concede that no, he couldn't get the same results because that clearly was a defect. Alright. So they all think this is funny, blah, 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 blah. It's just pathetic. Alright. So again, I'll be doing all of these experiments because nobody can do them honestly, or by the necessary eliminate as many variables as possible instructions. They just can't handle it. All right. So the Brozo is promising to show us he's gonna make the half mass weigh twice as much. So we're gonna. That's his big promise. Fuck. This just never ends. The bullshit. Alright, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot.